At least according to what you were told, you were never born. All of your preconceived notions about the origin of life are meticulously constructed delusions. You were conditioned from the moment you breathed your first breath to think that there was nothing before this life, that consciousness is something the brain produces, and that birth marks the beginning of existence. However, what if that was never the case? What if you were here long before your alleged beginning? Recently declassified CIA documents suggest something extraordinary, that consciousness is not bound by time, not created by the body, and not erased by death. Instead, it moves, shifts, and transfers. The government has spent decades quietly researching this, exploring the nature of awareness before birth, and what they found challenges everything we thought we knew about life itself. If Earth isn't the start, then where did you come from? And more importantly, why don't you remember? This isn't speculation. This is hidden knowledge. And once you see it, there's no going back. For decades, the government has studied something most people would call impossible. Hidden deep within declassified files and buried under layers of bureaucratic secrecy lies evidence that consciousness does not begin at birth. In fact, the CIA has known for years that consciousness exists independently of the body, operating in a state that defies everything mainstream science tells us. If this is true, it means our existence isn't tied to the moment of conception or even to our physical form. It means we are part of something much bigger, something they don't want us to understand. This isn't just a theory. These documents connect directly to classified research programs that explored the true nature of human awareness. We already know the CIA investigated remote viewing, telepathy, and the ability to project consciousness beyond the body. But what they found went beyond simple experiments. They uncovered something far more profound, evidence that consciousness exists before birth in a realm outside of time and space. In one set of declassified files, researchers examined individuals with past life memories, children who recalled vivid details of experiences they couldn't have possibly lived. These weren't just random fantasies. Many of these memories could be verified, cross-referenced with historical records, and even linked to real people who had died long before the child was ever conceived. The CIA took an interest because this suggested something deeply unsettling to their worldview. If memories, personalities, and awareness could exist before birth, then human life was not what we thought it was. Consciousness wasn't just a byproduct of brain function. It was something much greater. These findings align with reports from the Monroe Institute, a research organization that worked closely with the CIA during their investigations into altered states of consciousness. Their work revealed that consciousness could be separated from the physical body and that the human mind, under the right conditions, could access information beyond the limits of normal perception. But what's even more unsettling is that these same studies suggest birth itself is not the beginning of a person's existence. It is simply a transition, a movement from one state to another, and the implications of this are staggering. If birth is merely a shift in awareness, then what determines where, when, and how we enter this reality? Is it random? Is it chosen? Or is it controlled? Some things are simply too sensitive to reveal directly. That's why inside our free newsletter, in Insights Academy, we dive even deeper into these classified files. And for a limited time, you'll also receive a free copy of The Kiana, a book that unlocks the secrets of consciousness itself. The link is in the description, and you don't want to miss it. However, these records discuss more than just the past. They allude to something even more remarkable, a portal that predates birth, a place where awareness awaits the arrival of the material world. And the most startling aspect, for years the government has been researching it. If consciousness exists before birth, then where does it come from? The answer may lie in one of the CIA's most infamous research projects, the Gateway Process. Originally declassified in 2003, this study was designed to explore the mechanics of human consciousness, proving that the mind could be trained to operate beyond the limits of physical reality. But buried within those documents is something far more profound, evidence that the same process used to access altered states of awareness could also explain what happens before birth. The Gateway Process focused on something called hemispheric synchronization, a method of inducing brainwave states that allow a person to experience reality beyond their physical form. The key discovery? Consciousness does not originate in the brain. Instead, it's a field of energy, one that exists independently, moving in and out of the physical body like a frequency tuning into a radio station. This aligns with ancient spiritual teachings, but more importantly, it suggests that before birth, our awareness exists in a completely different dimension. Researchers involved in these studies describe this pre-birth state as an intermediate frequency, where consciousness remains fully aware, yet unattached to any single reality. Some experiments even suggest that in this state, souls choose their next life, selecting experiences based on the lessons they need to learn. But others propose a far more unsettling idea that consciousness is drawn into the body involuntarily, forced into the cycle of birth and rebirth by mechanisms we barely understand. Either way, these findings imply that life does not begin at birth. It simply shifts from one form to another. This idea that birth is merely a transition is not new. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes a phase known as the bardo, a space between lives where consciousness roams freely, unbound by time or space. Similarly, many near-death experiences recount individuals witnessing a realm where souls prepare for reincarnation. But what's shocking is that these mystical concepts are now being examined by scientific research, and even the government itself has quietly studied them behind closed doors. So if consciousness exists before birth, why don't we remember? The answer may be deliberate. According to both ancient traditions and cutting-edge research, something happens during the process of incarnation that forces us to forget. Some call it the veil of amnesia. Others believe it's a protective mechanism, ensuring each life is lived without interference from past experiences. What if forgetting isn't a natural occurrence? What happens if it's mandated? According to these research, we were in a state of complete awareness prior to our birth, where space was an illusion and time had no significance. And if that's the case, then our arrival on this planet was a restriction on something far bigger, rather than the start of life. This raises an even deeper question. If birth isn't the beginning, then death isn't the end. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It only transforms. If this applies to everything in the universe, why would consciousness be the exception? The implications are profound. If awareness existed before birth, then it must continue to exist after death. This means our consciousness is not bound by a single lifetime. It moves, shifts, reincarnates. It is eternal. The CIA's interest in consciousness didn't begin with the gateway process. Some of their most classified projects involve remote viewing, telepathy, and experiments on individuals who claim to remember past lives. Certain cases became impossible to ignore. Children recalling vivid memories of people, places, and experiences they could have never known, all later verified as historically accurate. The government wasn't just collecting data, they were actively trying to understand what this meant for the very nature of human existence. And it wasn't just the CIA. The U.S. Army, Stanford Research Institute, and independent researchers across the world quietly collected data on cases of past life memory, near-death experiences, and consciousness transfer. One of the most shocking studies involved children who not only remembered past lives, but described choosing their next incarnation. The stories were eerily consistent. Souls lingering in a timeless space, reviewing different life paths, then making the decision to be born. But some even describe being guided or pressured by external entities, as if their choices weren't entirely their own. If accurate, this implies that reincarnation is not only a spiritual path, but also potentially a control mechanism. This is hinted to in ancient writings such as the Gnostic Gospels, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and Eastern philosophies. Souls recycled through countless cycles of birth and death, imprisoned in a controlled reality, compelled to forget each time. And if that's the case, it begs the crucial question: who is in charge of this system and why? If birth and death are just points in an infinite loop, then who or what oversees the entire cycle? And if reality itself is a program, can we ever escape it? These questions aren't just religious or philosophical. They're deeply tied to what science and the government are quietly discovering about the true nature of consciousness. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. For centuries, humanity has sought answers to the most profound questions: who are we, where do we come from, and what happens after death? But the deeper we look, the more we begin to see that the story we have been told is not the full truth. Ancient spiritual traditions have long described the wheel of reincarnation, a cycle that traps the soul in the physical realm, forcing it to return lifetime after lifetime, unable to escape the material plane. And while these ideas were once dismissed as religious mythology, modern research, quantum physics, declassified government studies, and thousands of accounts from near-death experiences. Because if birth is not random and time does not work the way we have been conditioned to point in the direction of the same conclusion. If time is a myth, then birth and death are just two fixed points in a much larger, infinite web of experiences. If our souls actually choose when and where to be born, we must ask the even more profound question of what or who is influencing that decision. Believe then what happens before we enter this world and after we leave. It may be part of something far bigger than we could ever imagine. And if that is true, then the question is not just where we come from, but why we keep coming back. And the moment we start asking that question, everything changes. If everything we have been told about birth time, consciousness, and existence itself is a carefully constructed lie, then what does that mean for the lives we are living right now? The evidence is overwhelming: declassified intelligence files, quantum entanglement theories. Past life regression studies and ancient wisdom all converge upon the same haunting truth. Consciousness is not born with the body, nor does it die with the body. It is an independent force that exists outside the limits of space and time, one that shifts from state to state, lifetime to lifetime, experience to experience. But if that is true, why have we forgotten? Why are we trapped inside a system that ensures each life feels disconnected from the one before it? The answer is because this knowledge has been systematically suppressed, the idea that consciousness pre-exists, the body that time is a programmable illusion, and that birth is merely a transition rather than a beginning is not new. These truths have been discussed in esoteric teachings, hidden in ancient scrolls, and encoded within religious doctrines for thousands of years. Yet in the modern era, these truths have been systematically buried, dismissed as pseudoscience, ridiculed as fantasy, and in some cases classified and removed from public awareness. Think about it. What would happen if the masses truly understood that they are eternal beings, unbound by time or space, and capable of shaping reality itself? The entire foundation of control would crumble: fear of death, attachment to material wealth, blind obedience to religious and governmental authority. All these systems only function if people believe this life is all there is. But here's the secret. The governments of the world know this. They have known for decades, if not centuries. The same agencies that studied remote viewing, astral projection, psychic phenomena, and near-death experiences have also investigated what happens before birth, not because they were curious, but because understanding this knowledge grants unimaginable power. And the longer the population remains ignorant, the longer control can be maintained. So where does that leave us if consciousness is eternal? If birth and death are just arbitrary shifts in awareness, then what is the purpose of this life? Many traditions teach that life is a school, a testing ground for the soul, a place for learning and spiritual growth. Others believe it is something darker, a prison cycle designed to trap awareness inside the physical world where it can be controlled, harvested, and manipulated. But either way, one thing is certain: awakening is the first step, because once you see the illusion for what it is, you cannot unsee it. Once you begin questioning reality itself, the pieces begin to fall into place. Most people will live their entire lives without ever asking these questions. They will accept the illusion, follow the script handed to them by society, and die without ever realizing they were trapped in a system designed to keep them from discovering what they truly are. But you are different. You are here right now, reading these words, because some part of you already remembers. Some part of you knows there is more, knows you have been here before, knows the script you are following was never written for you. And if birth is only one part of the puzzle, then what happens after death? The cycle continues after the body dies. And if you don't know what happens next, you may find yourself going through the whole thing again and again without ever understanding why. Ancient mystical teachings, declassified research, and new quantum theories all point to the same disturbing conclusion. We are trapped in a closed-loop system that repeats itself, designed to keep us coming back lifetime after lifetime without memory or awareness of what came before. But the real question is not just whether reincarnation is real, but why it exists, and more importantly, who or what created and controls this cycle. Because throughout history, esoteric texts have warned about a system of reincarnation not created for spiritual evolution, but for spiritual enslavement. The Gnostic scriptures describe the Archons, malevolent entities that manipulate souls into returning to the physical plane to feed upon their energy. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes beings of light who attempt to trick the departing soul into reincarnating rather than ascending to freedom, and now modern accounts from past life, regression, hypnotic recall, and near-death experiences reveal something eerily similar. A tunnel of light, a sense of being called back, a review process that emphasizes guilt and obligation, and then an irresistible pull back into the womb and into forgetfulness. What if what we experience as death and rebirth is not a spiritual progression, but a mechanical reset, a program designed to recycle human awareness into the same system over and over again? There are those who believe that this entire reality is a type of soul farm, a synthetic construct designed to harvest human consciousness through cycles of suffering and amnesia. If this is true, it would explain why so many near-death experiencers describe being shown a life review where they are made to feel guilty or ashamed of their choices and then encouraged to return to the physical world to do better. But what if this has nothing to do with growth or karma? What if the real goal is simply to ensure no soul escapes the cycle declassified intelligence reports on remote viewing and astral projection confirm that certain individuals have indeed escaped the cycle? They have moved beyond the light, beyond the tunnel, beyond the life review, into a space where the entire system is revealed for what it really is, a machine, a construct, an elaborate program designed to capture consciousness at the moment of death and funnel it back into incarnation. Those who have seen this describe an overwhelming sense of relief, a complete detachment from the illusions of time form and identity, a memory of who and what they really are, and the realization that returning to the cycle is a choice. Not a necessity, but most people will never even consider this possibility. Society has conditioned us to believe that. This is all there is, that birth is the beginning, death is the end, and that anything outside of that narrative is unknowable or worse, heretical. But the evidence says otherwise. The government knows this, ancient traditions warned of it, and those who have glimpsed beyond the veil have all returned with the same message: we are more than we have been led to believe. But knowing this is only the first step. Understanding the illusion does not free you from it. The real question is, how do you break the cycle? How do you remember what you truly are? Because if birth is an entry point into the trap and death is just another doorway leading back in, then true liberation means going beyond both. It means seeing reality for what it really is and reclaiming the power that has been hidden from you since the moment you were born. But here is the problem. Most people will never do this. They will live and die over and over, convinced this is all there is, repeating the same mistakes, trapped in the same illusions, until they finally wake up and question everything. Because the moment you start questioning why you are here, why society works the way it does, why history repeats itself, and why everything seems designed to keep you distracted and afraid, you have already begun to wake up, and once you wake up, you become impossible to control. They do not want you to know that if enough of us remember, if enough of us awaken, the entire system collapses and humanity leaves the game forever. But once you remember who and what you are, you regain the power of choice, the power to escape the cycle, to step beyond the illusion and into true freedom. Ignorance is the only way to keep humanity trapped in the cycle.